Hey friends, thanks for taking time to listen in on a conversation Dick and I had about the 2025 Australian and Chinese Grand Prix. Red Bull might just be the fastest soap opera in history. McLaren is currently the fastest car, but what is the pecking order behind them? And is Ferrari for real, or are they a pretender? As you'll hear, Dick and I have opinions, some of them in agreement with one another, and questions that still remain about what we're seeing on track so far. But before we get to our conversation, I need to ask, can you help us out? If you haven't already, please take a moment to follow us and give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast app, as well as share this episode with other F1 fans. We know our growth is because of you, and the guys and I thank you. Hope you enjoy our conversation. All right, Dick, right as the recorder was about to start, I said, it's been a while since we've done this.
It has been. It has.
I can't
Finally.
believe it's been a month. It feels like in some ways just a couple of days ago we were talking about testing, but
Yep.
in many ways so much has happened in like our day jobs and even the stuff that we're working on the podcast, which I'm so excited to, we'll be slowly rolling it out. But our task
hmm
at hand today is we are going to talk about the March 2025 races, which are Australia and China. And we're going to hopefully release this right around the Japanese Grand Prix. So our thoughts about the upcoming race. So I don't want to waste too much time because one, you and I have a lot to do. And you also know, and I think you actually let the cat out of the bag on our race notes from China, that I had jumped onto a plane to go to the UK, and I'm back, but I'm battling jet lag. That's one. And then I'm just trying to catch up from being gone. So I'm going to let you be the driver of the conversation. You know, you've always been such a gentleman to let me kind of take us down the road of the conversation. But today, Sabrina needs to kind of be in a cruising position, if you don't mind. So is that cool? Are you
That's
happy to
totally
take
cool.
over?
Totally
Okay.
cool.
Okay, so let's get started with our highlights, I think, and then you can take us down that way. Do you want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
So I, again, I always like to look at things kind of as a whole and then maybe dissect them just a little bit, right? And so I think that we can say that in March, the Red Bull soap opera continues. Maybe, the hype meister in me would say that it's the fastest soap opera in history. I don't know. Or it's got the fastest revolving doors. You name it. Red Bull is certainly a talking point. McLaren, I don't think there's anybody who would argue this one that they have the fastest car. But the argument after that is who's got the second fastest car? Because in my mind, the pecking order is not that clear. That's just me. And one of those that is confusing the dickens out of me is Ferrari. Are they for real or are they just a pretender? Keeping those kind of storylines in mind, if you think about Australia, I think one of the big things that jumped out at me was just the gravel that kept getting sprayed all over the track. You had a very rainy, slippery track anyway. And so guys would overcook it either on the exit of a corner or they would misjudge and cut a corner and they'd pick up gravel and they'd throw it on the track. And next thing you know, other drivers behind them who were caught unawares, they weren't throwing it in the gravel trap, they were throwing it in the wall. And so I really think the organizers at in Australia need to do something about the proximity of the gravel tracks versus the racetrack. And it's because it kind of ruined several people races or qualifying efforts. So that was one of the things that popped out just as a, oh man, because that was the kind of thing that kind of muddied the waters in my mind. And with China, of course, interesting race. McLaren, of course, they got it really right, but 3 cars were disqualified from the race. And that was, I can't remember when 3 cars were DQ'd from a race, to be honest with you. I mean, it happens every once in a while, somebody will run their ride height a little bit too low and they'll grind a plank out, and which is what happened to Lewis Hamilton. But other cars then coming in underweight and all that, I mean, I mean, who would have thought Alpine would have a car disqualified for being underweight? If it was this time last year, everybody would say, no way, right? But here we are. I thought that was kind of interesting. For you, what were your highlights for those two races?
Well, I want to ask you a question before I go
Hmm?
into my highlights. So,
Okay.
when you talk about the gravel traps, I don't remember there being gravel traps in previous years. Do
Hmm.
you in Australia?
I don't remember 'em being playing the pivotal role that they did.
Yeah,
So maybe
right?
they did something to the track and I'm just not aware of it, but that
Yeah,
was
and I
not
don't
good.
remember anybody talking about that. I don't remember anybody, because you know how as we get ready for a race, the commentators start talking about different technical things as well as the technical reports that come out. I don't remember anybody noting that. And I was just going, why did we do this? Or was this a addressing a concern from previous years that I just
Hmm.
totally have forgotten? But I'm agreeing with you. I don't understand why those gravel traps were there. I kept wondering what are alternatives other than like sausage curbs? What else could they have done to create the barrier that they want to keep people within track limits other than a
Well,
gravel
great
trap?
question, because I'm not a fan of sausage curbs either.
I remember that. So what would be the
Yeah.
alternative between the two?
Well, I would move the gravel traps back. I mean,
Oh, just the
you know,
placement of them versus not
hmm
having a gravel trap. Okay, gotcha.
yeah, because let's face it, if you cut across a curb and there's
Hmm.
grass there, if
Hmm.
that grass is wet, that's a big penalty enough as it is.
Right, right.
In the dry, okay, maybe not as much, but still, it's not necessarily the quick way around because you're going to be losing grip. The other thing, a little trivia for you, you may know this already, but and maybe most of
Oh
our
wow, you
viewers,
think I might know the
listeners,
answer. It's
yeah,
we I've grown, I've
that's
learned.
right. How many eyes does Helmut Marko have? It's not a joke, it's a serious question.
I think he only has one, right?
Correct. And it's because when he was racing in F1,
Hmm.
a car in front of him threw up a piece of gravel, and the gravel went through his visor and knocked his eye out,
Oh, I didn't know that.
effectively, of course, ending his driving career. So the reason I say that is the visors that the guys have today are obviously much stronger, much better construction, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is that gravel on the racetrack doesn't lead to
Hmm.
anything good.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Wow.
There
That's
you
a
go.
really dramatic story to
Hmm.
personify that
Hmm.
reality. Okay.
Yep.
So then you asked me what mine were from both of the races.
Hmm.
And anybody who listened to our race notes would probably say, "Oh, you said that then," but it's still the same this many weeks after, which is in Australia, I actually had two. Oscar's resilience, specifically when he's out in the grass in his home
Yes.
race. And
Yes.
he had the pragmatic, calm, cool cucumber thinking not to go forward, but to reverse. And he did it in such a way. And then when you heard the grandstands clapping, cheering, I was like, yes, Oscar, that's so great. I mean, it just was one of those moments for me that is why I love the sport is the
Mm.
inspirational stories that come out that you have to be paying attention to.
Yep.
The other was what was so hard turned into something so poignantly beautiful about sportsmanship, which was Isaac's moment in the formation lap, which I couldn't even like when it happened, I like teared up because I could only think of the pressure this young kid was under and
Right.
how humiliated he must have felt and just all the eyes and like all the dreams he must have had about that about being on the Formula One grid. And then of course we know, which we will talk about, the saga of being inside the Red Bull world. Here he's made it and then that happens. I just
Hmm.
thought, oh my goodness. But then I was so grateful that they showed us what Anthony Hamilton did. And coming over to that young man and giving him a hug and giving him words of affirmation. Not only was it like a father to son, but it was also his hero's father. Like I'm actually getting emotional thinking about it because
Hmm.
you and I know, you know it more than I do, what young racers sacrifice to
Yep.
get to the level that they get to be on that grid and the
Hmm.
pressure, the responsibility, the sacrifices, everybody around them, the expectations. And that had to have been weighing on him from the moment that car spun and then getting and then having all the cameras around him when they I was so angry too when they were showing him tearing up and people were making comments about that because I was like, a guy can tear up and that's totally fine. And this is an emotional response to all the pressure that this kid has had.
Yep.
Give him a moment. You know, like
Yep.
it's the same way I
Yep.
feel about the FIA business about swearing. As much as I don't like swearing, I understand why in that high adrenaline moment, a racer might let a word out, like get
Yep.
over it, you know?
Yep.
I just, so that to me will always be a highlight of this race, but in a positive way because it showed you what the best we can do for each other. And I just loved that. So I could talk a lot about that, but I'll leave it at that. People can ask me more if they want to. So then China is a much more technical element of it. And again, it's coming from my race notes. Was Lando getting P2 despite those failing brakes? I mean, especially the beginning and the end of the lap, those curves. I don't,
Oh,
you know
yeah.
the technical name of them, but all I kept thinking was when I heard it, I went, he's doing what? And he's in P2? That's kind of amazing. Like, I just was really so proud of Lando doing that. Like, and even how he said the emotional and mental calculations he was doing and or just some of the innate like driving racecraft skill. It just made
Yep.
me really happy to see that in
Yeah.
China.
Yeah. It does a couple things. The racer in me says to be able to finish second in a car with virtually no brakes just goes to show how good the McLaren really is. And
Oh, that's a
then,
good point.
right. And then the second thing is it just goes to show how good Lando really is. And then, but the other thing is that, maybe Lando has always operated under the motto of I brake for the hell of it. And so he doesn't use the brakes that often anyway. So,
That's so good.
I don't think that's the case, but but he is that good.
Yeah.
Another thing, if I might, just a little bit
Sure.
of an example of you talked about the sacrifice that Hadjar and on all these guys have made to get on the F1 grid. We have our friend Jack Crawford. We've heard his story and the kind of sacrifice that he had, going over to Europe at 14 years old and being trapped there by COVID and all that kind of stuff. Crazy kind of sacrifice by him and his parents. But even on a smaller scale, we have a mutual friend, a Carter named Braden Westfall. And Braden is 12 years old. And to help his parents raise money so that he could go race, he actually went and talked the owner of a Mexican food place that he and his parents frequent into hosting a dinner slash bingo party. Got, I don't know, 30, 35 people to show up at 20 bucks a throw. And ultimately, the owner of the place didn't charge him a nickel because he was so impressed by the effort that this 12-year-old put in. And most of the people who won the bingo pots gave it back to them, which led to them being able to make a race. Incredible. But that's the kind of stuff that these guys have to do at a very, very young age. Really
Yeah.
proud of him.
Me too. I think I'm so glad you brought that up because if people understood fully the sacrifice that these kids' families make, they would have, I think, especially the people that I see on the socials kind of trolling and
Hmm.
making these comments, it makes me so angry. And
Yeah, they
that's
have
one of
no
the
clue.
reasons, yeah, they have absolutely no clue, which is one of the many reasons why I appreciate the approach and believe in the approach that we take, which is we're not trying to take anybody down. We're only trying to build people up because we're not the ones out there making these
Right?
sacrifices and doing
Right?
it. So yeah, thank you for bringing such a personal story of Braden and we're really proud of him. We'll have to talk about that, like his career and even just some of the stuff that happened in the last few weeks that you got to witness. We're hopeful and believing good stuff for young Braden.
For
Okay,
sure.
so on the next point, which is the development race, do you want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
So we've had three different tracks to go and race on for right now, right? I mean, we've thought about Bahrain, we've thought about Australia, and we've thought about China, all with different conditions. Remember, during testing at Bahrain, the desert was way cooler than it normally is, and that's an abrasive track surface as well. And then we go to Australia, lots of rain, slippery track, gravel on the track, all that kind of good stuff. And then we have China, which is a very unique design track. It's got a long, long straightaway on it that is, I think, if not the longest, the second longest the whole series, along with a very technical section. So, it established that there is the beginnings of a pecking order, but I'm not completely sold yet on what that pecking order is, other than that McLaren clearly has the best car right now. But that being said, I don't think we yet know where each car's weaknesses are and how they need to be addressed. I mean, usually it's sort of like, well, like think about it like in 2023, everybody was saying, the Aston Martin must be the one of the best cars out there on the track in the corners, but it's kind of draggy and it's slow down the straightaway. They need to clean up the aero on that car. Right. That's a great example as opposed to in 2023, the Red Bull, so far as we knew, had no weaknesses. Right. And so I don't think we know yet, and I think it's going to take us a few more races before we actually start to say, okay, I'm sensing that Team XYZ has got the second best car, or maybe somebody has gained and pulled even with McLaren. So how's that for a non-answer? I'm punting.
No, I think it's great actually because I'm actually in the same frame of mind. I wonder if we're having groupthink or it's because, oh, Obi-Wan, you have done a good job of helping me to look at
Teaching my
this
Padawan.
differently. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
We would definitely be grateful for any of our listeners chiming in. You feel free to send us a message by email. You can chat and tell us what you think. But I have to agree with you. I feel like the races and testing, I like how you included testing because I didn't think about that, but it did provide us with a number of data points. I feel like we'll have a somewhat of a better idea with Bahrain. And when I was writing my notes down, I didn't have time because again, I'm catching up with everything. Remind me, which is the one that's more tire deg problems? Is it Secure or is it Jeddah? My brain told me Secure,
Secure.
right? That's the one that
Right.
has all that deg. Okay, so then I feel like Japan plus Secure will be much more data that would hopefully be consistent. Now,
Yep.
Japan, if it rains, which I kind of personally wanted to, it's going to skew the data. I think that
Hmm.
then we would have to wait to Jeddah,
Yep.
which makes me go, okay, really? I don't think we'll have anything until Barcelona. But that point, that's when we know that those regs are going to change and everyone's going to probably start to taper off any level of development
Yep.
efforts after Barcelona. So then I was like, well, really? All of this is going to be kind of Barcelona. It's going to be post Barcelona is when we're really going to see car is kind of almost, you tell me. I don't think it's going to be static, but as close to static as they're willing to do for the
Yeah.
rest of the year. And then
Yeah.
it's going to be just drivers, like seeing them now really feeling, okay, this is the car I've got to deal with, knowing its perks, knowing its weaknesses, and knowing their tracks. And like that's when we're going to get to see those kind of margins, which I feel like in the last 4 years, we really haven't seen that. So I'm actually
Right.
getting super excited for the season post Barcelona when it feels like there'll be some more comparables because of the way we are in the regs as well as what tracks we'll end up seeing. So I'm with you. I don't think any of this that we've seen is indicative of really where the pecking order will be.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't disagree with you. I'm going to throw this out. I think we're going to see more cars running aero rakes in the next 3 or 4 races. I'm already reading that there's a number of teams that are bringing big upgrade packages to Imola, believe it or not. And yeah, Aston Martin, Red Bull, several teams like that who know that they need to optimize their product. And honestly, Sabrina, if you think about it, let's take Williams, let's take Aston Martin, because those are two teams that both have aspirations to be on the ascendancy, right? They want to be at the sharp, pointy end of the grid. Aston Martin next year is going to effectively be the factory Honda team. There are rumors that Williams is going to wind up being the factory Porsche team. And this is like as of just
Whoa.
a few days ago.
Oh, I missed
So
that.
yeah, and it's a rumor that apparently is starting to pick up a little bit of speed. I need to do a little bit more research, but let's just play this out just a little bit. And then you have Sauber, right, who definitely is going to be taking over, and become the factory Audi team next year. Those teams need to learn how to develop their cars. So for them to continue developing longer than, say, McLaren would not be that big of a shock because they really do need to learn the skills involved of, hey, I think this works in our CFD modeling. We made a model of it. We put it in the wind tunnel. It seems to work. Okay, does this success at the factory now translate to real life on the track? And we saw that last year with Aston Martin, where they would come in and say, "Yep, found our problem. We had a bad floor," and they put a new floor on, and they'd actually go slower. And so that correlation from what they learn in the factory versus what actually happens on the racetrack, they've got to get their arms around that in preparation for the following year because that's how they're going to grow.
That's a very good point. I mean, it's like the other side of the coin of how far do you go with resources to try to maximize what you have
Hmm.
versus is it worth the development skill training that you know you're going to need in the future? Like that's a very delicate balance.
Hmm.
And that may be contingent on circumstances like knowing which tracks their cars are better suited for, what kind of
Right.
data it's going to likely bring back to them. Wow, Dick, that's like you've got all the wheels turning in my brain because this is a whole new thing to think about when it comes to the development wars. I love it. So good. So good. Okay, so we could talk about this for a long period of time. People can let us know if they want us to pick up on this for the next monthly race review or even in our race notes. But we've got to be mindful that we have a number of teams that we want
Yep.
to discuss. So I'll let you go first. McLaren, I think you've already said it, but why don't you say it again? What do you think about them?
I think they have the fastest car and maybe not the best driver lineup, but it's close to the best. And the only reason I'm saying that is that I think about Ferrari and who they have driving for them, and I think about Williams and who they have driving for them. Those are also two very strong driver lineups that you could argue about.
I have no disagreement with you on any of those statements. So let's move on to Mercedes.
So, the car seems to be pretty good. It's a step forward from what they had last year. Again, I think the tracks are maybe masking a little bit of whether they have a really, really good car or if they're just kind of track specific. But it seems like the car is a whole lot less finicky in terms of the setup window. George Russell, I think, is just getting on with it with a car that maybe isn't the best, but he's putting in very intelligent performances that are bringing good results. They're good, strong results. And I think Kimi Antonelli is showing everybody why Toto Wolff is, such a big fan of his. The kid's obviously got a ton to learn. And I don't think there's rightfully should be a whole lot of expectation on him, but that kid is good. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I agree with you. If anything, I'll restate what I said in my race notes because I was quite impressed with Antonelli's ability to stay
Hmm.
what I saw as the rookie class and that
Yep.
he's right at the front of that rookie class. And I realize he's not with Russell, like you said, but I think his race more at China. I know I heard somebody ask, or some commentator going, I don't know why he got driver of the day. And I think that most everybody who voted, I think that most people feel the same way I did is that he's doing so much better than what we expected. And like you said, understanding a little bit better what Toto Wolff sees in him and
Hmm.
that he's learning and growing. And it was a really good race. And with Russell, I think he's stepping up as a leader. I think he realizes this is the moment to do it because with all
Yep.
this discussion about Max possibly leaving, Russell's got to put his stamp on the team now. And I think he should feel good. I mean, during the post race show, he did say that he maximized everything, but the McLarens have pace. I mean, I don't know that we would have said that a year ago at this time with a Mercedes car. Russell
Hmm.
seemed to be very optimistic, where it feels like in the past 2 years, every race feels to be like they're battling that car. So
Right.
I feel like it's going to just get better. I was concerned about Kimmy after Monza and that debut,
Right.
but China felt like it was proof of what you have said time and again is that it's easier to get a driver to rein it in than it is to get them to push. And I feel
Right.
like whatever they're doing over there at Mercedes, one of the things I've always respected about Toto is his ability to help his drivers psychologically. And I feel like that's what we're witnessing with both of these guys, that they feel supported by their team and their leadership. And so, and that the way that they must be doing their driver management is such that both of them are, even though they may be grappling with things, they don't feel like at loose ends. Does what I'm
Yep.
saying make sense? Do you see it similarly or differently, or am I off on a like left
Nope.
field?
No, I think you're right. I think it's a great point.
Okay, good. Well, then let's move on to Red Bull. Do you hear the laughter in my voice? Because we could say a lot about the car, and that's what we're talking about
Yeah.
more than anything. But we can bring in the drivers, though. I would like to have more of the soap opera conversation towards the tail end of this
Yep.
recording, if you don't mind. Let's
Sure.
get through the rest of the field.
Yep.
Otherwise, we'll get stuck there, I think.
Yeah. So I don't believe that the Red Bull right now is any better than about the fourth best car. Max is taking it by the scruff of the neck and just ringing it. That's the only reason that car is going that quick is because Max is the fastest part of that car. I mean, even he had said it's not very good. And I think it's one of those things, we've been talking about how over time the gains that Red Bull could be making in 23 and 24, right? When the car was so dominant. Well, wasn't super dominant in 24, but it was still an outstanding car. I kept saying, hey, look, there's only so much blood that can be squeezed out of that turnip. And sooner or later, they're going to not be making gains anymore, but everybody else who's behind, they still have room to grow and develop, right? And so I think we're seeing that now. They've built a car that they describe as being very peaky. In other words, it's really, really hard to get it into the setup window. And even Max is saying, yeah, it's really not a very good car.
I agree with you on that because that's what I've been thinking is that they've went so far in trying to get that incremental edge that they've needed. I'm wondering if they went almost too far
Mm.
down the trail that is suited to Max because
Yep.
everyone seems to struggle in the second seat, not because they're not a good driver, but my listening to other commentaries and reading different things, my sense is that the car's development just kept going more and more suited towards Max
Yep.
and the incremental edge pursuit that it may even that's why he's even saying it's not good. He would never struggle, but as it's just not as comfortable. Like
Right.
he's not out there for his normal Sunday afternoon drive that he's made it seem like easy, like he's just cruising around there it's so fast.
Yeah.
Like right? Like in China, it
Yeah.
seemed like he was very much having to use every brain cell. And I
Hmm.
always feel like when have watched Max like in the last 5, 6 years, especially, is he doesn't seem to, it doesn't overwhelm him. It just feels like he's one with the car. It's very natural. But right now, this one is resisting him almost like it's gone further than what he really needs it to do.
Yep.
Okay. I'm on a roll here apparently because
You
you're not
are.
disagreeing with me.
No, I'm
Maybe
really
I need to be
not.
jet lagged more often.
Yeah, right. No, I think, I think the point is that, there's still some things that can be enhanced in what you're thinking, but you're coming right along just fine.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Well, you can continue enhancing because I'm never going to think I've got it all together. I'm always
Yeah,
going to want
I
you to teach
certainly
me
don't
more.
either. I certainly don't.
Okay, so then let's move on to Williams. What do you think is going on there?
You know, I've always been a Williams fan for 40 odd years now, which is good. Anyway, I don't want to think of it in those terms, but I have been. And I really like where James Fowles has taken these guys. They've got two really strong drivers, and both of them are pushing each other. They're pushing the team. Carlos has obviously come in and said, fix this, fix this, fix this, and they've done it, or at least made steps forward to doing that. again, I think James Vowles is such an excellent leader, and he's clearly learned a lot from Toto. And that car is a major step forward from what they started the season with in 2024. Remember, it was overweight, didn't have spares, all of that kind of stuff. And all of that combined, the better build processes, better design processes, all that kind of stuff. What they now have is a car that on a given weekend at a given track, I believe is absolutely a contender for leading the rest of the midfield pack. So I'm really pleased for them. I'm interested to see how the season develops.
I couldn't agree more on every point. So I won't even try to say anything more than that. I'll say, let's get to Suzuka and let's see what happens. Let's move on to Ferrari. What are your thoughts there?
Oh, well, I think the jury is
I
still
heard the
out on them.
sigh.
Yeah,
That sigh.
the jury is out on these guys. I mean, they should have the second fastest car, and they should be really close to McLaren. And my guess is they just haven't quite found the handle yet on the car. There's more, it's not so much development work, it's setup work, is the sense that I get. And Lewis is going to bring in that expertise that maybe is a step up from the expertise that they lost when Carlos left. And you combine that with a guy who is obviously really quick over a single lap, although Lewis is obviously still has not lost a step. He's back motivated again. So I think that if they can refine their setup, I think it's possible that they may be the equal of McLaren or close enough that the wiliness of Hamilton could actually come shining through and bring McLaren to tears, which would be kind of fun to watch. But at the same time, we are talking about Ferrari. You know that they like to revert back to the circular firing squad. So let's see what happens over the next 3 or 4 races. I want to believe that they are there or thereabouts.
Yeah, I agree with you in so many ways. If anything, my continued faith in Fred Vasseur is
Mm,
that
yep.
the many things that you just said hopefully can be remedied because he has proven that when these things kind of like pop their heads, he's able to whack them pretty good. And so I want to believe that he can do that. If anything, it's so funny, ironic that I recorded my race notes before the DQs. And so
Right.
I was like so optimistic. I was like, why are the Ferraris doing so good? And then get on a plane and then find out, oh no, that's not quite what happened. I
No.
did have a moment of concern though after reading about these DQs, but in the end, I guess I chalked it up to the fact that this happened on a sprint weekend, which I feel like that's the same thing that happened in Coda in 23 to Charles. And it further reinforces to me why I don't like sprint weekends is
Hmm.
that it creates these opportunities for these errors or even for teams to push the boundaries. But
Yep.
I think this was an error, at least in the plank for Lewis, because their normal patterns and procedures, not to mention their data, has now changed when it comes to a sprint weekend. And I truly don't see how we expect teams to truly optimize when they're not really given the full time to do it. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to
Yeah,
say?
I
Like, I
mean,
really dislike these sprint weekends.
yeah, I mean it's really, really eliminating really 2 sessions
Yeah.
to actually go and do development work on your car, which means that you got to roll it off the trailer or out of the container, as the shipping container, as it may be. That car's got to roll out and it's got to be pretty much spot on, or you're toast. I mean, we kind of see it with Aston Martin in the sprint weekends. They usually use the sprint race as a test session. You can see it, and it's just sort
Yeah.
of like, oh yeah, you know, we're going to go out and gather some more data, and that's
Yeah.
it, but, anyway, I digress.
Well,
But
and on that point that you said about the cars rolling off the cargo,
uh
it, it, I don't know if you saw, there was a huge delay. I think at least three
yes,
quarters of the grid didn't get their cars until like late, Thursday, I think it was.
Something like
And
that. Yeah.
it was just an insane because of some transportation customs issues. So all the more, like, again, I just am not a fan of sprint weekends. Every time they send me the feedback as a fan, like, what did you think about this race? And they go, do you want this to be a sprint weekend? What do you think Sabrina says? Absolutely not.
Yeah,
Please take away
right.
sprints. I do
Yep.
not need a sprint weekend.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's me on my soapbox. Let's move on to Haas. What are you thinking?
Well, of course, they had a very, very quiet test at Bahrain. They certainly had a really tough start in Australia, particularly Ollie Bierman. He struggled. And I was just sort of like, oh, how's this young man going to, how's he going to bounce back? Well, he actually, Ollie, and the team bounced back admirably at China. They discovered that they had made some setup issues that were they had setup issues that were, I guess, relatively easy to define and correct. And maybe the Haas in its current situation configuration is well suited to the layout in China, but they had a pretty strong rebound and a decent showing there in China. And so, hey, let's see what happens. I know that this is another team that has updates coming. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is I'm just rooting for them. I
Yeah.
really think that they have some great opportunities ahead of them.
Yep.
Okay, so then the next would be Aston Martin.
Well, they've had a tough start to the season. You know, again, talking about gravel on the trap, I think it was in Q2 in Australia. Fernando, right towards the end of Q2, he went purple in the first two sectors and obviously was putting together a great lap. Comes up on a corner in the third sector, hits gravel, about loses the car, and goes yellow in that sector. So whatever he might have qualified, it didn't matter, and I don't believe he made it out of Q2 because of that. And that's kind of been a little bit of a picture of the way their year has gone so far. Lance had scored some points, which is great, but Fernando got caught out again with gravel on a wet track in the race in Australia, put it in the barriers. And then in China, his brakes caught on fire. And I've heard of that before, but I mean, really? How good is the car? I'm still scratching my head on that one. I'm not sure. I don't think they're the top of the mid pack, however. But that said, Aston Martin has apparently said, yeah, we know what our problem is, and we've got a big development package coming for Imola that will correct our weaknesses. So, we saw what happens when a big development package comes and it works, which is what McLaren did at Miami last year, and of course they did it the previous year at Silverstone, I think it was, or maybe Austria. But anyway, they brought a big package, and all of a sudden, they've got a car that capable of running up front. Maybe this will happen with Aston Martin. They've got a wind tunnel that works now that's theirs. So maybe that will help them in their competitiveness.
Yeah, I think I'm not as optimistic, but I'm also not fatalistic about it either. I'm
Yep.
reserving my judgment on them. I really want them, i.e., Fernando, to have an
Hmm.
awesome showing at Suzuka. Because, like, I feel like newer fans may not fully realize, as with Seb Vettel, either, same thing, how talented Fernando remains.
Yeah.
And I really want his faith in Aston to be well placed. So, I mean, I'll be very happy to see him just pull it out in a way that nobody right now may think it could happen. So in that
Right.
sense, I'm joining your optimism. Okay, what
Yep.
about Kick Sauber?
So they've definitely made a step forward in my book, but they're still the 10th team on the grid. Now, can they move up the grid? Sure. Obviously, a lot of their focus is going to be on next year just because they know that, it's the risk reward thing. They'd rather, spend their development money on their 26 car because they realize that the odds of them going from 10th to 8th probably would be very tough. And what's the reward for going up a couple extra spots? Sure, there's a few extra $1 million in prize money for sure, but they're probably better off focusing on next year.
All I'll say is a step forward is good. I
Hmm.
have no other comments other than that.
Yep.
Okay, so Racing Bulls. I put our order today in order of the teams of what they were standing, but can we push them and let's go to Alpine and then come back to Racing Bulls?
Sure, of course.
Okay, so let's do Alpine. Tell us what you think.
Well, they've started the season pretty well. Car seems pretty good. I mean, they had that DQ in China, but obviously Gasly is proving that he's actually a hell of a driver. And I don't think that there's been too much question about that for the last couple seasons, but it's really showing through just how solid he really is. You do have to wonder about Jack Doohan, how long he will be the race driver, the number two driver at Alpine, for a couple of reasons. One, it's come out that he has a clause in his contract around his performance where he's actually given 6 races. And remember, he drove at Abu Dhabi, and now he's driven at Australia and China. So that's 3 races. And then we've got Japan and we've got Bahrain. After that, there's your 6 races, right? If I'm counting right? No. Am I
No,
counting right?
there's one
No.
more because
One more.
that'll
So
only
that'll be
be
Jeddah.
because there's a triple header this month.
That's right.
So at
It's
the end
Jeddah.
of April, yeah, Jeddah is in the middle.
Excuse me.
That's
I
okay.
have a master's degree in accounting and apparently I can't count. But anyway, that's another story. So anyway, after Jeddah, you've got Franco Colapinto sitting there. You know that Flavio Briatore didn't just sign him because he liked Franco's smile or something. And there's a lot of people who believe that there's all these companies in Argentina that are just dying to throw millions of dollars at Alpine to put Franco in that car. Now, the last I heard, Argentina was having some real serious economic trouble. So I find that a little hard to believe. But
Good
on the other
point.
hand, we are talking Formula One and we are talking Flavio Briatore. So he probably knows something that I don't know. But if I was Jack, I probably would not plan on seeing the season out. And it may not have anything to do with his performance on track. It may have everything to do with the fact that Franco is able to bring in a whole bunch of additional sponsorship money.
That's such an interesting point. That's making me have to, in real time, think about some of the stuff that's going on in Racing Bulls. So I'm going to write a little note that you're going to talk about Racing Bulls and get us through the lineup of the development. Then we'll move to our final takeaways. And don't let me forget to come back to Jack Doohan and Racing Bulls
Okay.
based off of what you just said.
Okay. So I've been really surprised in terms of their competitiveness. I think that it's safe to say that they are definitely vying for best of the rest in the pecking order. Both Yuki and Isaac have been very effective in that car. I've been mega impressed with Isaac. I mean, yeah, okay, he had the issue at the start of Australia, but you know what? The kid was looking really solid in practice and qualifying. Yuki has put in some good performances over the last couple of races. I think that car may be the best of the rest, at least in the first couple of races it is. I'm going to be really interested to see how Liam Lawson goes with this car. I think he's going to suddenly go a whole lot quicker than he did with the Red Bull. I think that car is a great package with a big setup window, is what I think.
Yeah. I have so many thoughts about this. So buckle in, okay?
All
Because I have
right.
thoughts that are going to lead to questions of you and very much open to you challenging me. So I realize I didn't give you my opinion about Alpine because you had thrown me for a loop. So let me come back and say, to be honest, team wise, it's been a little bit of a blur about the team and their development. Driver wise, I feel like it's a different conversation, but you
Yep.
did a really good job about talking about that. So I'll close the loop on my opinions about Alpine. Racing Bulls. Okay, so when you talk about the car and it being the best of the rest, I keep coming back to the fact that the beginning of 24, everybody was making a big
Yep.
deal about the V car being Red Bull's car. Were they sharing too much information? Was it the
Hmm.
old spec car? And then we know that, what was it? Barcelona of last year, the car at Red Bull started to go down the development track that suited Max.
Yep.
So my thinking is, yeah, the V car better be the best car out there if it's an older version of the Red Bull, like an
Mm.
earlier spec. That
Hmm.
would be, and then if you add in that they've been developing it not towards the max tendencies, but a Yuki or Daniel and all the other constellation of peoples that have shown up in that car,
Right. Yep.
right? And
Yep.
when you say now, when you're saying that it has a larger setup window, maybe that's why our drivers have been able on that team to like incrementally push it. Like it's not so
Right. Right.
individualized development towards one driver's tendency, but it's
Yep.
been tweaked. Am I making like, am I
Yeah.
even in the realm of possibility? This is the
Totally.
non-STEM person.
What you've made, the case that you have made is that Racing Bulls has figured out how to make a Red Bull with a wider setup window. That's
Yeah.
basically what it is. And you know what? Uh, I don't know because I'm not an aerodynamicist and all that kind of stuff, but it
Hmm.
actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. That's how it's just my intuition, not or my like my strategic thinking mind of
Hmm.
thinking where would debriefs be like? What would they
Hmm.
be? What would be the car starting position? And
Right.
then knowing what their drivers either tendencies or what they were trying to push them to develop in their own racecraft
Yep.
makes me think it wouldn't be because we understandably, right? Everyone
Yep.
holds Max in the highest regard because he's I mean, phenomenal. So you
Right.
wouldn't want to go against what Max is asking for.
Right.
But not detracting from anybody else in this conversation of Liam or Daniel or Yuki. They're what is obvious is they are not Max. So you
Right.
have to approach it as you listen to what they're saying. Like if I was the engineer or whoever sits in the debrief, I would be thinking, how do I help this guy? But how do I help the other guy? Because I got to figure out how to get it close enough that both of them can operate.
Right.
While in the Red Bull world, it seems like, what does Max want? And then we'll see if we can make it work for the other person who happens to
Hmm.
occupy their seat. So that's
Yep.
what leads me to that conclusion.
Yep.
Okay. So I feel like anything Liam may do better in this red oh, I'm sorry, racing bull,
Yep.
but I still wonder about his mental health and like what
Mm.
psychological spiral he's in
Right.
because we know that he built himself up both to be a racer and then to say I deserve the seat. And then for two races to have been quote demoted. But I listened to somebody the other day that highlighted as much as we want to distinguish its sister team or not, Christian Horner is very clear that these are both race Red Bull car like Red Bull teams. So I wonder
Hmm.
if they don't really look at that distinction and they just see it as four seats that Red Bull has. And so it's not truly a demotion. It's just two versions of the Red Bull car with whatever configuration of racing. Like
Hmm.
it's maybe not a demotion like the public likes to think of it because that's not internally the culture there. Do you see what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yep.
Which maybe it's not as detrimental to Liam's mental health as we might perceive it in the more traditional sense because they do things out of the box. They definitely have their own drum that they beat over there, which has been successful for them. So like I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt when I feel like everybody's just railing on them that maybe it'll surprise us the way that they handle it.
Hmm.
Again, I'm not as experienced as you, so I could totally be off, and I am willing to accept that I could be totally off. Um,
Well, I
okay.
probably have too.
Okay, so then now let's go to the soap opera itself. You want to go first or you want me to go first?
Oh,
I
I'll go
have a lot to
first.
say, so you might want to take it the first crack at this apple.
Yeah. So I think number one is that we've got an ongoing soap opera, and we're going to call it Red Bull. Ferrari is the circular firing squad, and Red Bull's a soap opera. And this has been going on for quite some time now. I mean, you think about everything that went on the winter of 23 and 24 about all the allegations of Christian Horner, and then the bad blood that spilled out between Jos Verstappen and Horner and Helmut Marko and the power grab that was being made after the death of the founder of Red Bull and who's going to control and all that kind of stuff. I think that they have developed at Red Bull a fairly toxic culture. Not sure who's to blame, but at the end of the day, the buck stops with Christian Horner. And I think he's all about trying to sort that out because I'm not entirely convinced that he's the cause of it. But I think he's also got to put his foot down, maybe. Not sure. But anyway, long story made short, I think it's going to be fascinating to see how Yuki handles the pressure of being on the big team and the pressure of making his debut on the big team in front of his home fans, especially knowing that Honda has paid extra money to Red Bull to put Yuki in the car. So there's that. And then you kind of touched on it. Will Liam finally suddenly find his mojo all over again? I think if he has a car that is drivable, he may very quickly be able to go, oh, you know what? This is not so bad. I'm better off. And by the way, I can actually race people again. And so I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. And of course, the outlier on all of this in my mind is, hey, will Ferrari succeed in finding those extra last couple pieces of setup to do the job in Japan? So that's my take.
I like it. Okay, I told you earlier to put your seatbelt on. You know how sometimes you have to tighten the seatbelt when you're in a
Hmm.
plane. They said
Yep.
the turbulence and stuff, so tighten your seatbelt because here we go. Here's some of my thoughts. I think it's all unfortunate, so unfortunate. When we look at Suzuka, I will say I will be awake and watching that live for quali,
Hmm.
especially. I want to see where Yuki and Liam end up. I mean, if Liam out qualifies Yuki, can you imagine what everyone's going to say?
Yeah. Right.
And then for Yuki's sake, I really hope he qualifies in the top 10 or higher. I mean, he needs that this weekend. This is his home Grand Prix.
Yep.
And in my opinion, this is essentially a Hail Mary effort by Honda before they part with Red Bull to get him into that seat, which is so much pressure on Yuki. I mean, it is truly a difficult position for him, in my opinion,
Hmm.
because I
Yep.
think he knows this is the last opportunity he's going to get for a Red Bull seat. Not that's not detracting from him. It's just the reality of where the seats are open and the way the cars, relationships, all the business and politics behind
Right.
a race seat. So now, what I would love to see is also he shocks all of us because as we know, I feel like I'm a recent convert to Camp Yuki. I've never been a detractor, but I've never been singing his praises. What I would love is for him to shock every naysayer, everybody who's underestimated him because as we've watched the saga of Checo, will he, won't he remain, who gets to go into that seat, and then for Yuki to be passed over, wouldn't it just be sweet just to see him you know, do
Yep.
well. And
Yep.
I think both of those things could happen too. Liam
Hmm.
can get up there and Yuki can shine. And
Yep.
that would really be kind of a great thing for Red Bull to show they took the hard cutthroat position that we all kind of expect of them, but it
Right.
actually fell into place perfectly and everybody comes out like that would again that's why I kind of think it's like a Hail Mary. Oh, well, let's do it, let's see what do we have to lose kind of thing.
Right.
All that said though, this isn't in my opinion a statement of confidence in Yuki. It's all about the team is got their back against the wall because I can't calculations wise, data wise, at least what we know or at least what I've seen, I don't see where anything's different from December or early March to justify this type of switch. Now,
Right.
I think it was Bernie Collins who said it that it does come down to the calendar that we have two races done and you have three more races to go this month. You don't really want to wait three more races to make this decision if you were going to do it.
Right. Right.
And if they didn't do it now, they would need to wait until all that's done. Points are going to be lost. It's further demoralization. So I could see why they had to say, and they do have that cutthroat mentality, which maybe it wasn't that hard to say, look, three races is not worth our time. We got to do this now. And that I give them
Hmm.
commendations for having that kind of non-emotional look to it. I don't know
Right.
that I would have that fortitude, but appreciate that from them. Okay. Then it goes back to the car and this whole going down the path, like in my mind, going down the Max path. And that's not against Max, but this two different templates. And it just seems very interesting if I were more STEM proficient to know the technical differences. I feel like I could be able to extrapolate more. But my limited STEM knowledge tells me that this is just as much about the technical as it is the culture there that
Hmm.
is leading to what we're seeing. One of the
Hmm.
things that I did find interesting was the press release. There was a language statement, and this is the lawyer in me, that said they had a duty of care to Liam. And I don't know if you had a chance to read it. I think it's an
I've
interesting
not.
statement. I found that very odd. Again, the lawyer in me, because one could argue that Liam really isn't a rookie. Like Crofty made that statement very clear multiple times, kind of ad nauseum. If he's listening, I'm sorry, but it felt like you just kind of went on that soapbox a bit about
Hmm.
Liam not being a rookie because he's done 11 races. Now, albeit it was in a different car, and he's only gotten two races now. So I wonder how much data they truly have gotten to determine whether or not Liam is actually viable, especially in his current state of mind. Like I
Hmm.
that to me, this idea of duty of care and how does that apply? What are they using to say that they have extended duty of care?
Right.
That said, I do wish Liam had gotten time in a car like Kimmy did. And I
Right.
think that's why we see the differential in Kimmy's performance this year versus his Monza debut. And if Liam had gotten an older Red Bull, I mean, some might say, use your same argument, Sabrina, that he was in the Racing Bull car, which you're saying was an older spec or older template of the Racing Bull or the Red Bull. But
Yep.
I mean more like the laps. Like I wish they had sent him out to do testing more with that
Yep.
whole time, that saga. What would they have had to lose? I don't
Right.
know. Like I
Right.
literally don't know. Like was it a financial decision? Were there regs? Because I haven't done enough research to know that. Maybe there were stipulations they couldn't do. But it just seems odd that Mercedes figured out a way to do that. Other teams figured out ways to do that. If you knew that this person could be eventually promoted, why weren't you putting him out wherever you could to get the laps? So he, knowing that second seat is as hard as it is to be beside Max. It just
Well, it's a
seems
wonderful
like,
question. It's a wonderful
yeah,
question because think about it. I mean, Ferrari did it with Lewis,
correct. That's why I'm
right?
like, it just
It's a
seems,
great question. Why
why? I
not?
don't get it. Why not? So that was a hard thing for me. And then the other question I have, and this goes back to your statement about Jack doing, is let's play it out. Neither of these guys bring what the team needs. Yuki's crushed, which I hope is not the case. Liam, he doesn't perform. Where are you now as Red Bull? Like who else is in the pipeline? Are they going to
Um,
return Liam back to Red Bull? Are they going to attempt to put Isaac in there? I mean, I truly was racking my brain. I was going, you who do you have? I guess it's reserve drivers,
well, they've
but
got drivers that are junior drivers, but from what I understand, most of them are just not, they're
yeah,
still years away, 2, 3 years away from actually being considered for Formula One. So, who do they have in the pipeline? I don't think they have anybody.
right. That's the same conclusion I came to, which then for a team with such a vaunted pedigree and discussion about like their academy, it's shocking to me how decimated that pipeline is right now. And it
Yeah.
really saddens me because I don't think it has to be this way. I wish they could get out of whatever situation. As you said, something's happening we're all on the outside not privy to, but they found them in that situation. I hope that they can figure out a way out of it. Now, I say all that. Where my mind started going when you brought up the whole Jack doing, well, if Jack ends up having an opening, like no longer having a seat, Red Bull realizes either in the Racing Bull seat or the Red Bull seat, they have an opening. Would they take the risk of bringing in a Jack? I guess it depends on his performances. Maybe that's an alternative if they don't have a pipeline that truly ready to get into a Racing Bull or Red Bull seat.
Well, if you think about it, you have Valtteri Bottas,
Oh, that's a good
you
point.
You have somebody like a Jack Crawford. You have
Yeah.
someone who used to be a Red Bull Junior. You have Felipe Drugovich, who's
Mm-hmm.
with Aston Martin. So there are some drivers around who you could pick up and put in the car. Obviously, Botas is a known quantity. So I would think that there would be teams that would be interested in him because
Yeah.
he's a proven race winner,
Yeah.
you know?
Well,
So
maybe that would be the option to put against Max because what we do know is Valtteri raced against Lewis or with
yeah,
Lewis. So at
yeah,
least he has that ability to hopefully match and or push. And I don't want to say comfortable. He understands the role of the second driver.
right. Yep,
And
for sure.
after what he's had to deal with of being in the Sauber world, he's probably like as much as he has the aspirations to be a world champion, he may understand this is the opportunity for me to continue racing. So I'm willing to do that. So maybe that's a name I hadn't really considered because I really was like, it seems like you would want to be able to bring through the pipeline, but if the spout is not like it's drained, you better go look for another
Yeah.
spout.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of people who say that right now the Red Bull Driver Academy has got problems because
Yeah.
they really don't have anybody ready to step in.
It's just unfortunate. Just
Hmm.
it's
Yep.
saddening because there's so many good quality talented kids
Yep.
and individuals out there
Yep.
that just want that opportunity.
Hmm.
But man, okay. All right. So as I said, I had a lot to say and I reserved it to the end. But I think that we've covered oh, wait, no, we have to go to our final question, which is if I'm a new fan, Dick, what should I keep in mind regarding these races? And you can even lead into the next race because we're so close to Suzuka.
Sure. So I think so far we've seen the cars race on three very different kinds of tracks. And now we're going to see them on a fourth track in Japan that is also very different. You know, with Bahrain, we had testing there. It's a permanent facility, obviously in the desert, and it had a highly abrasive track surface, and they were testing in temperatures that were much cooler than expected. So you had all those kind of anomalies that were not necessarily on the cars, but rather the environment that they were racing on. And then we went to Melbourne, which is, for all practical purposes, a street circuit. It was wet, it was slippery, it was very, very different from what they had in Bahrain. And then they went to China, which has a very unique layout with some very long straightaways and some technical portions and all that. And now we're going to Japan, which is your quintessential old school classic F1 track, even has a bridge that, so that the track can run as a figure eight. So it's a really neat place. And I think that we're going to see at least get a little bit better sense of what's what coming up this weekend.
I think I would have to say everything. I agree. And I said it earlier, but I will say it again. I want rain for Suzuka. Specifically, I would love it for quali. And I also want to see the beautiful cherry blossoms. I want to see the cars going over those fantastic curves and the figure eight that you said. I always love watching that. Can you tell I love Suzuka? It's like one of my top races to watch each
Oh
year.
yeah.
It's just racing awesomeness. And then the drivers' standings, I feel like we'll get a clearer understanding. But I want to say this nobody send me any social medias, nobody send me any emails or be spoilers because this is like one of my top races of the year that I will be so sad if I know what has happened before I've had a chance to watch, even though I'm going to do everything in my power to be watching everything live, but no spoilers.
I
Okay.
understand. I'll keep my
You
mouth
do?
shut.
Okay, good. You understood the assignment. Okay, so
Understood.
I think that's it for this month. Are we overlooking anything?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, so then Dick, I will say I look forward to our next conversation.
Me too.
Okay, friends, what did you think of our conversation? Drop me a line via email, Sabrina at twoguysagirlandf1.com. Can you help us out? If you haven't already, please take a moment to follow us and give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast app, as well as share this episode with other F1 fans. We know our growth is because of you, and the guys and I thank you. And with that, let me say, we'll keep talking and you can keep listening in because we're just two guys, a girl, and F1. For John, Dick, and me, Sabrina, thanks for listening.